Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Particles are probably the most efficient way for you to do explosions, fire, water, as far as waterfalls, movement on top of the water, snow, rain, anything like that. You're going to use particles. I don't fully understand the underlying architecture behind how particles work. I just take advantage of it because it's creating literally thousands of these objects, rendering them, but it's extremely efficient, even on mobile. In fact, anytime you try to do this type of animation and you're using sprite sheets or anything else, I'll say, no, just use a particle. Just take into consideration, at least in my opinion, particles is a fine art. It took me literally hours to create my own snow, my own rain, to make it look like the way I liked it. And that's just because there's so many options and so many things you can do to tune it to make the particle look the way you want. I will show you what it looks like just at a high level, how to do particles. We'll use the same scene here. And I'll just do particle system. So you go game object particle system. And where is it? Where's my? There we go. So here are the particles. You can over here, as you can see, you've got all these options that talk about particles. You can apply a texture so that it can look like dollars or horseshoes or whatever you want. The actual shape of the particle, you can change that. But you can do some pretty simple things just to make it.
It's a really small shape, pretty much, right?
What's that?
Particles is a really small shape.
Yeah, typically it is, yes. But you can, like for snow, you would actually do a snow texture, so that when it falls, it actually looks like snowflakes. You know, so it's pretty cool how you can set this up. If you know that your game needs particles and you want to load a scene and you want the particles to be there immediately. You'd want to select pre-warm so that it's already set up and ready to run. If you don't do that, there's going to be a delay for it to actually create the particles and then render them. So it depends on your scene or where you are in the game that you want to do that. The number of particles, we could say 10,000. And then let me change some of these size, maybe. So I can change the size.
10,000 what? 10,000 little
particles. Yeah, you can
one time,
at one time, and it'll cache that and still be efficient. It's amazing.
That's what we're seeing right there. That's not
well, it's because I've got a duration, so I can set this duration to live longer. This will actually, once I hit enter, increase the lifespan of how long they live, and then there's no delay. Oh, let me increase that to as well. There we go. So now you'll start seeing, so like smoke, you'd want to have it live longer. The lifetime, once it reaches that, it destroys that particle and then or destroys the location and resets it. So it's doing caching internally from that perspective. You can have a start speed and an end speed so that it'll start slowly, go fast, or fast, slow, however you want to deal with that. You can have a size. So I changed the size. What did I have this original size? I thought I changed the size. Maybe I didn't. We'll try it at 1. So then it'll be small, but you can actually, oh, here it is. So I can have between 2 constants. So now I can have it go between 1 and 5 and randomly change what sizes that I want for them to have.
You make it go down instead of up.
Okay. I believe that is our position on, what is it, Y? No, I'm sorry, rotation. Wrong one. Z? X. It's depending on how my camera is. There we go. So I could then rotate it like that and then set the X to be higher up. And again, I'm in 3D perspective, so if I went to 2D, it'd be a little bit easier. There we go.
Now it's like a fracking operation.
Yeah. Oh, am I on it? So there you can change it. But the nice thing about it is you can. I mean, I've literally spent a long time just trying to play with what color do I want it to be to make it look like smoke or fire or a jet stream or something like that. You can do that. So you can spend some significant time. But the cool thing about that is then this particle system could then follow your character or your cursor or whatever you're dealing with in the game. So it, truly dust or some flakes. You got dandruff. Maybe that's a new game, dandruff collector or something. So you could do that. If you select anything else in your game in your window, particle stop. If you come back and you want to pause it just to modify things, then you got to remember to simulate, turn it back on. But there's a lot of things that you can do here that I haven't even touched on, as far as collisions, shapes. It could bounce off things, color by speed. It could change color over speed. So like fire, maybe from bright red to orange to yellow to white. Just depending on what you want to do. Particles, texture animation, so you could actually have it swap out textures, so sprites as it's rendering it. So some things that
So when you start getting textures, does this start where you have to start doing the math on how much cache you have, like on the video card, and that's where it starts to matter?
Not with a particle system, but yes, ultimately you would, when you start dealing, especially with 3D models, you want to make sure that
All your texture maps should be in video memory and all that.
Yeah. Yep. So
How much video memory is on these little devices?
more than you can imagine. You can do.
I can imagine a big number. I have 32 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, but from a standpoint of gaming, like 3D games, Halo now runs. I forgot what it's called, Halo Spartan Wars or something like that. Runs on the phones perfectly fine. There's some really awesome 3D games that you can play on these phones that you would be amazed how good the graphics look for what they're doing.
So 5 and 6 gig video cards for your desktop are really just ego trips?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm sure that it's doing some optimization and caching behind the scenes, but I don't know how it's making it so efficient. But there are certain things. The biggest thing with mobility, making sure that they run, is not the textures, but the polygons, the number of triangles.
Yeah, that's just GPU.
Yeah, you got it. But that's what's going to slow you down. The texture, as long as it can load it and swap those out, as far as putting them all into a single sprite sheet or a single atlas, what we would call it, that'll reduce the draw calls, and that's what's actually the expensive thing. And if you have the memory to put all of them in one, do it. If not, then put them by scene or something like that. And you can do optimizations within your game so that if your game is high graphic intensive, have multiple scenes and only load those in each dedicated scene, each part of the world. In fact, several games are what we would call modular, where like sci-fi games where you're in a spaceship or something like that. You actually have to go through a door to go into the next room. That going to the door of the next room is actually loading another scene, and it loads a whole new texture in memory and removes the previous one. So there's a framework. It's called Sector that I have, or that I purchased from the Atlas from the asset store, that does just that for you. It's modular, and it'll work in any world that actually is encapsulated 3D world, and it'll automatically load and unload those for you. So it's some pretty cool optimizations that you can make sure your game would run smoothly on mobile devices. All right, let me move on.
Can you buy or find pre-canned particles?
Yes.
I want an explosion, I want rain.
Oh yes, I have a ton of those. I've got I think I found for free rain and snow after I spent hours trying to make my own. And the only difference between mine and theirs was they were using textures. So they were using, for the snow, they were actually using a sprite that looked like a snowflake, which was really awesome because then it made it look beautiful. And I'll show you this. I can pass this around. But, we'll deploy this game on this device again, called Mad Dash. Every once in a while there'll be snow on here, or rain, and then there's snow audio that I have. So kind of soft sound. I'm just going to let it die until it comes up with snow. But yeah, it's never going to do that. But that all that is just particles. And the cool thing about it is, and for any scene, I just need one set of particles. And I just, for me, I then created a quad that covered the whole camera spectrum because rain, and I wanted to come down and then the same thing with snow. But because it's a particle system and how you set up your camera, you can then have it velocity if impacted. So the faster I run, the sharper the angle that my rain or my snow comes down. So it's some cool things that I get for free. I didn't have to do. Oh, there's rain, but you can barely see. So you can see that. You want to pass it around. The scene is that's just a particle. Oh yeah, I forgot. So you'll have to live. You can pass it around while to see the snow or stuff. Okay, so let me see what else we got next. Audio is going to be, yeah, you have to touch to jump. Audio is going to be fairly simple that you just bring in any type of audio. I would recommend coming up, adopting a standard format, as well as if it's 2D or 3D. Explicit.
Does it matter if it's iPhone or Android?
No, it shouldn't. Unity will take care of that for us. But the channel, so whether or not stereo or mono, if you're doing 2D games, I would make sure that either through Audacity or whatever tool that you're using, that you record so that it keeps that file size as small as possible. I would also make sure that if you are looping, to make sure that you have it, that there's no lead time or anything like that. The reason why is when you're programming from code and you want to, in the audio manager, you want to say, I want you to play this audio, you'll say play one shot. And it'll play it from whatever that file has throughout that, or it can loop or whatever. But if there's any lead time and your game you're trying to do a jump and he's halfway through the air before it plays it because of the fact that there's a delay in your audio. So you want to keep your audio as tight as possible with dead sounds or anything like that so that you can, through code, manage that and control whatever's happening there. Lights. I'll show you this really quickly. So if I come back down to the terrain, wherever that is, oh, it's way over there. I don't know if I'm in 2D, sorry. There we go. I'll just leave it like this. Now, what you can do here is you can go to light. You've got directional, point, spotlight, and area light. So the directional, whatever direction I'm pointed in. A point light is just a beam like a laser. Spotlight would be like a torch, so it'll do. And then area light, I believe, is just diffuses. There is no. It's like ambient light. So right now the sun is out, so we've got ambient light as well. There's no real direction it comes from except for probably the windows, but for the most part you have that lighting. Although we do have these others so that we have shadows, but the difference is I'm going to show you directional just so you can get an idea, and you can actually kind of see it right here, and it's not strong enough.
Stuff looks like kind of stuff used to be built in like the old lightweight, where you used to run back in the early zeros.
I don't know how far this is off the. Let me do this. I'm going to create a cube just so we can add light to it. There we go. And then light. There we go. So as I play with this light, I can adjust as it being directional where the shadow should come from. If I wanted to rotate it, that's not the right one I wanted. You should see how the shadow's changing. So as whatever direction I'm pointing, it's changing that. So in your game, if you want that, you can have it so that there'll be directional lights casting shadows and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. For mobility, you're going to want to bake and just have it so that it's within the scene itself. Unless you are doing something like sector and doing modular, so you're loading and removing so that the memory doesn't fully explode and your machine explodes as well. So materials and shaders, pretty much in the cube that I had there, any 3D object can have a material and a shader applied to it. For 3D, it's going to look like this, or the top right here. For 2D, it's just a sprite, because you only have really one face that you need to paint in a 2D game. I don't know how to build those. I've watched videos of people in Photoshop or in other tools build these out and then export them for Unity, which is pretty awesome. I can modify them as a template like this to make it so that it has gray hair or something like that, and load that in Photoshop or in GIMP, make modifications. But the actual creation, I don't know. I'm sure there's several really good tools, but I just do I code or do I design? I'm happier coding. So, but that is one area where I would love to be better myself in, is just being able to build some really cool materials and shaders so that the effects would be really nice. Some of the things with shaders is that with the dynamic, with lighting and stuff like that, you could have orbs. Instead of the coins, you could have it really look like, I think it's the coin. Oh, you guys haven't seen it. The uFrame example, which we'll show you, well, some of you may have, from their site, has some coins that rotate, but they're really cheap, just single color type of thing. With shaders, you can have it look shiny, look like a real coin. So you can do things like that to make the game play be a little bit more realistic and more appealing as far as eye candy. There are over 80 shaders that are available from Unity itself, and then you can download or purchase through the asset store custom shaders to whatever you want. So from a standpoint of shaders and materials, Unity is the first place I go, but then Daz Studio is probably the second choice that I would go to from a 3D modeling perspective. And within Daz, you can buy Genesis characters, so they're standard 3D models that you can import into Unity, and then you can apply a character, what's called a character controller, and it'll actually allow you to move it and play with that character without really writing any code. It's pretty awesome. When we get to the coding demos, I may create a new project with a character controller. The other thing that's really cool, I don't think I even mentioned it all in here, is something called Ragdoll. If you're using a 3D model or even 2D game, you can implement something called Ragdoll, and what that means is, say for example, you're running, you get shot, you want the person to die, so pretty much all control of your limbs are gone, it's just gravity. If they have the kinematic skeleton set up, which you'll do if you bring in a 3D model, the moment he falls, his arms would go up, his head would come over, and he would actually fall over the object. It's really cool. You don't have to write a single line of code to do that. It's just called a ragdoll effect that you can apply to any. And typically, I have a death state in my animation, in my animator. When it goes to that, it applies ragdoll, which is really cool, especially for 3D games more than 2D. But you could do it in theory with 2D using Mechanic, which is the animator. Within project settings, you have a gazillion options of things that you can override and change. Input is just, am I coming from a joystick? Am I coming from a keyboard? Am I coming from a mouse? Am I coming from touch? Input, in my opinion, is still one of the weakest pieces of Unity. I typically like to buy or bring in a third-party asset, which I use. The one I use is In Control. There's one out there in Git that I don't know. He's a doctorate student or something like that he's written that actually is even better than the two that are actually the two most popular that are in the asset store right now. I'm curious to see if he's going to take that and commercialize it as an asset. But right now he's maintained it as free. But that's basically where you would go to do input. I actually like using a third party because it's seamless between knowing whether or not I'm using keyboard, mouse, or touch, and it handles all that for me. If I don't, then you have to do mouse down, key press, all these different conditions that you check for input. And I would rather just say, give me one single input, and I'll handle it universal. I don't care where it comes from. So if I, instead of ASD, WX, or the arrow keys, which would be another set, I don't have to worry about any of those keys. I just say, are you moving left, are you moving right, up or down, and it handles it for me. Tags and layer, we've already talked about. Audio. Time, do you want your game? I can't remember the name of this game. There's a game that I remember playing on the Xbox several years ago where you could pause time and go backwards in time as the character ran in it. Sometimes you'd actually have to reverse time in order to figure the puzzles. And the game, the guy won a lot of awards as far as the graphics and the visual effects, but it was a completely different game play because you had to. There was a concept of time moving forward, but then at certain parts of the game you couldn't continue. You actually had to go back in time, record what you're doing, and then play that recording in real time again. So there's some cool things that you can do with time here as well. The player, whether or not your main character has certain capabilities, mappings for input, physics and physics 2D, how strong gravity is. These project settings are at the project level. So if you wanted to universally, so what I did with the skybox, I did that universal. I said for this project I want to use this skybox, this background scene. You can do it there, or you can do it at the individual scene level. So if you know that your game is always going to have these settings, you would go to project settings and set these. The quality determines whether or not whether it's bandwidth constraint or the quality of the device. You could say, well, I want you to only render it low, medium, high quality, and that's actually how well the images will render and not be pixelated. It automatically will adjust that based on the original assets that you give it. Graphics, what type of graphics you want it to incur, and that includes lights, shaders, shadows, and then network. You can simulate network activity or emulate or simulate low band. So if you want to be on a phone and you say, well, it's not even, I don't know what speed you would want to test, but you can simulate those different modes to make sure your game still works properly. And then the editor, you can modify at the project level for the editor. I'm just going to pass through these, but these are all the hotkeys, the main ones that you have in Unity. These 2 pages, and you guys can review them and look at them after the fact. This is also came straight from the Unity manual, so if you can find it, it's a good thing they have a search because the Unity manual is ginormous. So
Control D is like the same as Control C, Control V.
yes, duplicate. Yep, exactly. Okay, so scripting. Again, we've kind of talked about this a lot already, but within Unity, you have 3 languages that you can write it in. You can do Boo, Unity script or JavaScript, and then C#. Boo. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
We actually wrote some coverage for that one.
Good coverage for today.
Yeah.
Gary.
Oh, without, yeah.
Yeah. In Unity, you can select from the menu Assets, Sync, Visual Studio Project. That pretty much won't be that necessary with uFrame. It'll be maintaining that for us. There is also within Visual Studio, within Unity, the Unity for Visual Studio, and there's a Generate Projects as well in there, and Open in Visual Studio menu item. The nice thing about it is that when you're within Unity, any script file that you double click will launch the editor and open it up. Since I've installed Unity for Visual Studio, I've had a couple of crashes where it's crashed Visual Studio. Once I've killed the process in Task Manager, it seems to be working fine, but I've noticed some issues with that. Most of my development for Unity is on a Mac, so I'm using MonoDevelop instead. Unity now has, through Unity Visual Studio Tools, the ability for you to debug your scripts. So Mono has always had it. So that's a nice feature to have and makes your life a lot nicer, a lot easier. So just kind of some high-level things. In scripting, when you're actually starting to write code, everything that you add through Unity is going to be a type mono behavior. And that mono behavior is a baseline game object that understands its transform or its X, Y, Z positions. It understands whether or not you add components. So if you add a rigid body, you add colliders, it knows to speak that. Unity also has in that class some base methods that it will fire and use by default. It has a start, which will be a one-time, the first time that the project's loaded. It'll have an awake, which whenever the object is brought back into the scene. It has update, fixed update. The difference between these two is update will try to render every frame per second, so every frame. Fixed update is a tighter loop that only checks for, or you should only use it when you're trying to deal with input. So if someone's typing or moving the mouse, you don't want it to actually impact the rendering of the scene, but you still want to capture that. So you use fixed update. And then the concept of coroutines, which is just your asynchronous programming. Remember that Unity right now is 3.5 .NET, so it's not 4 or anything with async and await. But this really becomes a moot point when we deal with ReactiveX. So
if you hit the back button and you open it back up on your phone, is that the wake? Is what?
No, this would be more scene specific. So that what you're talking about is more a game level waking. So the concept of tombstoning. Unity typically handles that pretty well. So if I were to pause or hit my home button, launch out of the game and then go back to it, it's going to remember exactly where I am. I don't have to write any code like you originally had to do with Windows Phone when you were first trying to develop for it and making sure that you serialize that out. Unity handles all of that for us, so it's a pretty nice experience. The game will pause, but they're not going to experience any outages. One thing I would probably recommend is if you are in game and you hit home or you go out of it, hit the back, that when it comes back in, there's an event, I forgot what it is, activated or something like that, that you give a 5-second delay, or you actually have a pause button that you change to play or something, so the user doesn't just get jolted by that. Okay, so within Unity, we've already talked about this. Everything is a game object. Game objects have at least a transform, and all transform is just its position in XYZ world space. You can add, though, other components, as many as you want. So audio, mesh, material, script, pretty much anything that you can think of. And then game objects are in a hierarchy, so a game object can have, like the player could have a head, body, arms, legs, whatever you want, nested as children within that. In fact, that would be several levels. If you had like maybe arm, which could then have elbow and wrist or something, things like that, depending on how complicated your 3D model is that you're bringing in. Prefabs is basically just a representation of what a class is, so that you can create instances of it. And then prefabs is another thing from a standpoint of modularization. So write it once, store all those settings that you have in Unity, and then be able to use those again. And at design time, you can just drag it, like I did, onto the project window, from the project window onto the scene. It'll show up in the hierarchy as blue, and so you know that it's a prefab. If you make any modification in design time to the prefab itself, it'll honor that, and you don't have to do apply or revert. If you do any instances of the prefab in the scene window, then you want to impact the prefab, you want to hit apply or revert, depending on what you're trying to do. At runtime, though, if you make any modifications, you go back, it's going to go ahead and revert all those changes, regardless of whether it's a prefab or not.
So at runtime, you're really making them on the instance,
Yes.
and then it's going to revert.
Yes, exactly.
You can't really change the
Yes,
prefab.
and not everything is an instance, though. Not everything is a prefab, but yes, for prefabs, that's exactly right. Okay, and then we've already kind of talked a little bit about these, but some of the game objects that I just didn't have enough time for slides would be cameras. You can have multiple cameras. In fact, a lot of games, especially first-person shooters, will have the main camera, which is your scene, but then a mini-map. That mini-map may be, or a driving game, which is a rear mirror with camera pointing backwards. You can have as many cameras as you want, just be careful not to confuse the user and make sure that they understand the paradigm of the game. But it's really cool adding those in. A lot of games, you could actually have a loading or a welcome screen that does a pan of the world, so the camera just flies through the world, and that's your loading screen or your welcome screen or your main menu screen. That's always just doing that, which is kind of a cool effect instead of just a static background. Because it's a 3D world, why not let the camera fly through it and record that and record what happens there and then play it back as an animation. So some really cool things that you can do in your games by using the power of the components that you already have out of the box.
If you had two cameras sort of looking at the same scene from different directions, are you reducing the number of draws?
No, actually adding cameras adds some extra work, but it's not going to reduce any amount of the calls or just by showing it from two different angles. It's just you actually would have like a heads-up display within the main window to show that secondary camera, or split screen, or however you're trying to do that. If you want to do a split screen game where you have two players and you wanted to render both of them at the same time. So, and I'm sorry, what?
You pay for it.
Yes.
regardless.
Yeah, but again, using the optimization techniques of your baking, your caching, well, you can still mitigate it and still do it. I mean, so there's and again, I don't think I'd ever do a game where I have split screen, so two people could play on the phone, but for a console I would, So audio, I'll show you a quick sample of that, and then ray casting. We're not going to probably get into that, but it's definitely, from a standpoint of efficiency, collisions of jumping bullets, things that are happening dynamically. Ray casting is a really cool way, and a lot of games. So tower defense games, right? You've got as your guys moving around, all these tower defense or these towers. All they're doing is they're emitting rays, and these rays, if they ever see you, then they check to see what's the distance, and if the distance is close enough, now I attack and I start firing. So ray casting, even though you cannot visually see it, you can draw a line in the debugger so that you can actually visually see it. But it's nothing visual in the game, but it makes your game so much more efficient than actually writing code to track the position of each one of these and every frame. So it's a great way to get some really cool effects within your game and good gameplay without the overhead of time. All right, the assets. I think I showed you this a little bit on mine where I was pulling stuff in. This thing is huge. You can pretty much search on anything you want, and you'll find at least a hit of something. There's so many things that you can look for, so many things that you can focus on that it's just mind-boggling as far as what you want your game to do, and then what type of components that you want to bring in. For me, I like trying to find good graphics or good assets from that standpoint that I can bring into my games. I like to bring in anything that helps me from a standpoint that reduces the amount of code that I have to write across multiple games. So like touching anything from input, networking, things like that, I can just bring in an asset and let it handle for me. Before 4.6, GUI was one big thing, so I have NGUI, which really was nice because you could skin it, you could do all these things. Unity's isn't as powerful yet, but NGUI, since I already own it, is already applying what you can do with 4.6 and giving you the best of both worlds. So some really cool things that you can bring in here, and it's just ridiculous. The thing that I really like about it is most of them either have a demo that's just a web player, so immediately you can actually click the link and just actually play whatever asset you're dealing with, play with it. So particles, explosions. Before I downloaded any of my explosions, I actually wanted to see what they were going to look like. The fire, the rain, everything else. I just clicked the link, let the Unity plugin download it, and just played with it right then. Like, okay, it's worth $5. I'll go ahead and buy it, type of thing. So.
Yeah, is that the average price? Would you say $5?
No.
Or are you talking?
No, you're for indie guys, it's gonna be 5 to 15. It's gonna be the average price for a lot of the low end stuff. But if you're talking about heavy duty frameworks or for pro, $90 isn't uncommon to find. Like, wow. In fact, there's a couple of them that are I think 1,500 of what they're doing. But for the most part of what you need, like an ad system, 30, 40 bucks. And what I do for things like that, for like ads, every day, and I'll show you this, Unity has the deal of the day, and it's usually 50, 60, sometimes even 70% off of that price one day, and they'll do it maybe once or twice a year. And they try to pick the most popular of the categories and reduce them, and I guess as long as the developer agrees. But I found several deals, and in fact, on my game developers group on Meetup, anything that people are interested in, they'll post it and say, "Hey guys, Unity just came up with this sale today. Check it out." Because there's been several assets that we've been wanting, but just like $70, really? I'll pay 30 maybe, but that's my max, So I'll wait, for certain ones like that. So if it makes sense. Again, the asset store, what you've purchased or what you have will show up here. Whether or not you've loaded them onto this hard drive will dictate whether or not you have a download or an import. You can always download, but if I had downloaded any of those, which I haven't, because they're all on the Mac, I would have import buttons to the right of the download, so I could immediately bring them in without having to go over the wire and bring them down again. So the location of them. So this is going back to you, Dan. If you guys, and I don't know how you guys are going to set this up, but if you guys had purchased some assets and you didn't want each developer to have to pay for their own version, you could say, well, guys, write a PowerShell script or something like that so that it pulls it from your share and puts it into the whatever their user account roaming Unity asset store and dump it right in there, so it would show up for them to import into the editor itself. So things like that you guys can play around with and see what's the best way. Instead of having them manually go to the share, you could just say, here, run this PowerShell script. You've got everything in place that we need available. All right, build. Again, you're going to see more than just this, but you manage everything from a platform within the build settings here. In order to get, I think, Visual Studio tools to work properly, you want to have script debugging enabled for Windows here, so that Visual Studio will work properly with you as well when you want to debug. And we'll look at this when I do a sample deployment. And I've already talked about all of these, but I just wanted a slide for you to remember. Your sprite atlases, or any textures for that matter, whether 2D or 3D, need to be powered to. It'll just the processor will be able to do zipping and compression against them. If they're not, it won't do it. It'll just ignore it, especially iOS. And caching your game objects, instead of doing instantiate within Unity or within the editor, Mono or Visual Studio, cache them, pre-cache them before the game starts, and then go through that array or that collection to reset what they are. If you do destroy and instantiate, especially on a phone, you're gonna see some degradation of the game itself. You can select, and some of these are even more powerful in the Pro version. I'm sorry, that's misspelling. That should be static. Where was I? Let's fix it so that you guys. So you can make within your scene objects that are static, and that'll tell Unity when it actually renders this through the game engine, it's never going to move. It's never going to be impacted by collisions and blow up or have anything like that. And that'll make the objects or make the rendering of the game faster. So especially in a 3D world where you have things and you want to be like Battlefield or Medal of Honor and you want to be able to destroy buildings and break them up. If there's certain places that are just, fire hoses or whatever it is that will never get destroyed, make them static, and that'll improve the game. Bake your lighting and your shadows, so that if your game, if you don't need it, and you can use the combination of the both of them. You can have baking as well as dynamic lighting in your game as well. But for mobility, shadows and lighting isn't as important, but it is extremely expensive. So you want to be as conscientious as possible when you're actually dealing with that. All right, Visual Studio tools for Unity. This is to allow us to be able to do debugging of a Unity app within Visual Studio. You've always been able to launch from Unity into Visual Studio and write your code, but the common standard was always doing console.log, so you could still see it in Unity when it's running. Now you can just put a breakpoint in any of your Visual Studio files. When it runs and it hits that point, it'll stop right there. You can inspect and look at the object. So it is a great feature. We've had it for a long time within Mono for Windows and Mac, but Unity is Visual Studio is a much better editor than Mono. So
It only works with 2013.
no, there's
2010 version.
there's 2015, 2013. There's several. In fact, let me jump down here because I've got a link for it. So I think I do. Come on, how do I?
You kind of have that in control click maybe.
That's what I'm doing. Oh, I just saw it. How many people does it take
All
to?
the Windows is trying to save you from yourself.
Yeah. Windows. 2015 preview, 2013, 2012, and 2010. So, pretty much the whole gamut.
Microsoft bottom.
Yeah. So, and it makes sense, right? And they're really pushing, and Unity, I think, is probably their strongest partner as far as developing games. They're really pushing a really good developer experience when you're using Unity. And again, Mono's okay, but I just think Unity or Visual Studio is better. So, unless you use Sublime, but I won't throw that out there. Where am I? Okay. I'm going to keep moving. Okay, great. So we'll just go through these uFrame slides, and then I'm going to jump into code. So uFrame, from my perspective, when I first looked at uFrame, it's a complete paradigm shift. Understanding MVVM, yeah, you can bring that with you, but understanding how uFrame works within Unity is just completely different than any other programming that I've ever done. And the reason for that is uFrame requires you to step back and think very abstractly of your objects. So it's actually forcing good OO principles and modularity. But everything is a designer. Everything is just diagrams. So you're UMLing. You're going back to when I was in college, everything using UML. TogetherSoft. You guys remember what that took? Never mind. C++ editor. But it is a designer. It has a full diagram. It's a hierarchical designer. So whatever node that you're on, if you double click it, it loads it. If you want to go back to the parent, you have to double click the same one again. So it's a little bit of a paradigm shift of understanding navigation, understanding where things live, where things belong. But so far, and again, I'm not very efficient or proficient in it yet. I love it. I will probably be using this on any of the games that I play with or try to do in the future, as well as we'll probably have a session in the game group of going over this, because it's really good from a standpoint of taking that spaghetti code of what your script can be and creating some logic out of that madness. And it's very easy for you to have either these God mono behaviors that are trying to do everything within that update, or trying to create singletons just so you can communicate across your objects, whereas uFrame has DI built in. So you get your dependency injection, you get your separation of concerns, you know that your UI logic belongs in the view, you know that your data structure belongs in the view model, and then you know that any of your business rules that you need for your game belong in the controller. So it's a nice pattern that I'm, again, 6 days old playing with, but what I've seen I've really liked, and there's a ton of documentation and videos out on it. My biggest thing is that videos only go so far until you actually lift the hood up and start trying to do it yourself and getting yourself accustomed to it. I like looking at it from a concept of an existing game and trying to build that game out using the tool itself, just to see how easy is that, and then would I think in that mindset. The guy who wrote this is pretty smart, and And I love that within 1.5 he's using reactive extensions, and we'll look at that some more.
This is the framework head trainer is using, or?
Yeah.
Oh, they picked it? I thought you guys picked it. Cool.
No, we picked it for head trainer.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think it's a great choice. So, not cheap. This one's $90, but well worth it when you actually think about what it does behind the scenes and the separation of concerns that it gives you. I look at uFrame and I don't think there's a model. It's MVC-like, meaning that there is no model when you actually look at the object and map everything out. You have a view model, which is your stateful data object, which is, to me, from an MVVM perspective, that is the model. And then you have the controller, which is your game logic. That's the view model, and then the view, which is the same. So, to me, I would have just called it MVC, because that's really what it is. They or VVMC, because there really is no model in there. The model is actually the view model, if you will. So there's some really cool concepts, and we'll actually go through this through the samples that I'm going to walk you through, as far as how things work and how you can share things. uFrame supports inheritance. It supports properties, computed properties. It supports allowing you to generate scene properties, some things that make life really easy as far as navigating your object graph when you're in code. When you create things through uFrame, if you create a child of that or you create an association with that, it automatically creates bidirectional properties. So from the child, you can always reach the parent in code, or from the parent, you can always reach the child or children. It's really nice to have just for free. The way that it's set up is everything is code generated. It uses partial classes, so all the virtual methods are in a partial that you don't see, and then in your partial it's empty, and you just override what you need. So again, a very nice structure, and we'll look at that.
Via events or via lazy reference?
What was that now?
You said you automatically see your children and you automatically see your parents.
The properties themselves that you expose. When we go through the designer, you can create a property, you can create a collection, a command. Events are going to be commands. So
Just like they are in
yeah,
VM.
yeah. So it does follow that pattern, but the lazy loading again, when we get into the reactive X part of it.
No, not like lazy reference, because you have the whole problem of when you tear down the object graph.
Yeah. No, I haven't. I don't know what he's doing behind the scenes, but I haven't had any issues so far. So I don't know what he's doing. He may be using lazy.
I've always had problems building the trees out.
Yeah, he may be using lazy though.
In .NET, they just
Yep.
do a lazy reference.
Yeah, which he may be doing. I don't know.
That's fine. I was just curious.
So yeah, anything else in here? No. Okay, so this is what I put together, is what I think are kind of the top level objects within uFrame that you can kind of get yourself acclimated. You're going to always have at least 1 to n scene managers. Again, you can have multiple scenes, but a scene manager is what's going to rule everything. In a Unity project, uFrame project, you have to have 1 scene manager and 1 subsystem. Without those 2, you don't have a uFrame project. Subsystems can be anything: a level system, a player, an enemy, anything that represents, an actor, I guess, if you will, within your game that you want to have logic that's atomic around it. Your views, which would be associated to whatever you want to represent. A view component is a helper. I'm not sure I fully understand the differences between view and view components, but it's the ability for you to actually point a subsystem to a view component, which would allow you to automatically swap out views. So say for example, you have a player, and you want to have the view of the player running, right? But when the player dies, you want to show his status, his health, his experience, his star rating. Then you could, because that's still off of the same player object, you could just use a view component to swap out and bring in a completely different view, which is really powerful if you think about it, because it's just, again, MVVM, that view model never changes. It's the view that does the representation of it. So he's got,
That's a view component.
well, To support one-to-many, you go through a view component, and then you'd have multiple views that you could switch. So it's kind of like a switch statement for you that allows you to do that. So and you'll see some of these things of how the diagram the editor works.
You know, in Unity, you got your scenes, your hierarchy, and
Mhm.
things like that. Do you have view?
Yes, you have a single diagram for uFrame. We'll look at that in a second. Yeah. And then you have properties, collections, commands, which we talked about. Scene properties, which are properties from your view model that get exposed to the view, and they become, the moment you expose them to the view, they become scene properties. Computed properties, state machines, and then bindings. And bindings are how you get the two-way binding from the UI back to the view model or the controller. So a lot of things going on here, but extremely powerful. And the more you grok it, the more you're going to love it.
$20 more than the subline.
Yeah. So then it just announced with the 1.5 that they support the reactive framework. You can't use the reactive framework and bring that assembly in directly into Unity. And I don't even know, what is the AOT in iOS? But the AOT does not support some of the code dependencies that ReactiveX, the .NET extension, has. So this guy rewrote some of it, modified it so that it's friendly for iOS, Android, all other platforms that does not have that dependency, and released it for free on the asset store. So you don't need uFrame to use UniRX. You can use it in any project, regardless. And then as you know, iObservable, iObserver, and iDisposable are the kind of the foundation of how Reactive Framework works. And we'll look at some examples as I go. The nice thing about uFrame is that when you first load the diagram, it's going to have these hotkeys right there, showing on the top right. So it's a little annoying when I'm on a laptop this small that it takes up that much real estate, but it is nice to have until you figure out all the features. The number one thing that I'm going to tell you guys when you deal with uFrame and Unity and Visual Studio is save and compile with everything. Every keystroke you do, save and compile, because you'll be going through tutorials, you go through demos, and like, it's not there. I don't see my view model. What the heck is going on? It's because I created it in the diagram, but I never hit save and compile in the diagram, so it never got generated. And that is, I've literally deleted, destroyed my Unity instances, my Visual Studio, reset it back up, thinking there was something wrong with that, and it was all because I didn't hit that button. And so, saving.
It still exists.
Well, in the model, in that diagram, but it's never been. You've never told it generate those files for me. So
Yeah, but you can do all of
I could have.
and then
Yes,
save and compile.
you could have. I just
and
wasn't.
then-
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I just was killing myself. All right, so it's time for demos. I'm going to go through two demos on uFrame, a scene manager and a reactive state manager. I guess I'll go through three, and then there's running guy, which I'm going to show you the finished product. I went through and just watched the video tutorial just to see how easy it was for me to do. All three of these are actually available on his site, but I actually wrote a script for the first two for myself, just to see if I could follow the script without watching any videos or cheating. And there's several places where he actually jumped and made the leap where you either had to have done it before or remembered, oh, I got to add that. And I'll make a note of that. But let's get started. Any questions or? So I'm going to go here and just say no, not scene. Cancel. This one more time.
For that, did you already have a check somewhere for the uFrame?
That's what I just canceled for. You're
Okay.
reading my mind. Yes. So, thank you for saying that, because that's exactly what I wanted to do. I'm going to switch this to 2D, and I'm going to scroll down here, and I know that there's a Visual Studio. You have to have this. This doesn't come native within Unity, so if you want that debugging and that good interaction, you'll need to bring that in. If you guys have your code source controlled, it'll already be taken care of, but just make sure you have the MSI installed on your.
Yeah, for the guys working on the head trainer stuff, we need to do the Git repository.
Yep.
You don't have to install them
Yeah.
separately or add them or anything, they'll just be there when you get the code.
Yep. So these two are the ones that we'll need, and I'm just going to go and create. Don't save that. It's going to go through and build me.
Call me.
Good luck, man.
Want to see my script? I wanted to make sure it worked, so I don't sit on
Did you buy Exploding Kittens?
the exploding kittens. No.
The oatmeal guy? The card deck he has, the Exploding Kittens game?
Huh. I haven't.
The thing funded itself in 7 minutes.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I think he's at like $2 million now.
Good grief. What, is it a game or what?
Yeah, it's a card game. It's like, it's Uno combined with, shoot, I can't remember the other game. You'd have to watch the demo, but,
It's on Kickstarter or what?
yeah, Kickstarter.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that.
I'm still waiting on my watch. A few years ago, that's all I Kickstarter.
Oh, are they done?
Micro-
Are they done?
No, I get an update on it like every month.
I'm still looking for my
I
butter
don't,
knife.
I don't want another update. It's like,
Yeah.
don't even tell me the progress you're making.
Give me the watch.
I'm looking for my butter knives that were supposed to be here for Christmas. They have holes built in, so like when you shave the butter, it kind of like comes through the knife and makes a little shape.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can cut like rock hard butter.
Nice. All right, I'm going to just point out, because I added that package for Visual Studio Tools, you now have a new menu, generate project files, open Visual Studio configuration, and then about. You won't have that unless you import that, which sounds like that's part of Git, so you should automatically have it. Just make sure you install the executor or the MSI to get that in place before you open up any of your Udemy projects for that. The other thing that you'll notice once you have uFrame installed is that you'll have a new uFrame designer. This is pretty much the first thing that I go to, being 6 days old, playing with uFrame, is I want to set up a uFrame project. A Unity project isn't enough. You'll see that in my assets, I have the uFrame library that I brought in, and the Unity VS library. So I'll go down here. I'll go down here, diagram, and this is what it looks like. So I'll call it, I guess, Scene Manager.
So uFrame is an entire pop-up.
Yes, you can put it anywhere. You can dock it anywhere you want. Typically, I'd actually have it in one of my other monitors, so I could actually have it open because it's so big. This is what it'll look like. I would, if I were using it, I would have it nested somewhere in here across a much larger screen. But for right now, this is what it is. And then I'll go ahead and close that for a second. And I don't like how this is. Let me change this. Yeah, this is better. And what do I want where? Okay, that'll probably work. I'm just going to call this main diagram. And that's the diagram that we're working on right now. So, all right. So once you create that project, then you really only have two options when you first start out, and that is creating a scene manager and creating a subsystem. You really need the top level for your uFrame application. It needs to have at least one scene manager. With this one, we're going to create two, actually. and I guess let me back up and just kind of describe what we're going to do. So within this Unity project, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up through uFrame the ability for us to have a main menu scene that the application will start up with, and then we'll go and allow you to launch any level scenes from that main menu. So that implies, if you think about it abstractly, I'm going to have a main menu scene manager, since that's what he calls them, and I'm going to have a level scene manager, and that level scene manager will be dynamic based on the level name, and we'll talk about that in a second. Within scene managers, then I need some sort of system that manages it, because the manager is just kind of the top level and gives you definition, and we'll start walking through that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a scene manager, and why didn't that allow me to name it? I'm going to call it main menu scene manager, and I'll add a subsystem. I'm going to call this main menu system. He has a convention that if it's a system, he puts the suffix system. If it's a scene manager, he puts the suffix scene manager. Everything else is code-generated. It has the suffix view model, controller, or view by default for us, so we don't have to do anything there. But it's just a convention that he follows pretty religiously on all of his documentation and videos. And then what I'm going to do here is, because I know that this system is what's actually going to be the implementation for this manager, I'm going to link it by just dragging a line there. Now let me add the next one, which is going to be, I think that's level C manager. And now, oops, if I can spell, level system. Okay, so here is one of the things that to me isn't as intuitive. Navigation within uFrame is by clicking on a system and or an element or a state machine, double clicking the header. It has things underneath it that you can select as well, but for right now I'm going to keep those down until I use them. So I don't even know which is the first one I was going to go to. I'm going to save and compile. That's right. So if I don't save and compile, Unity still has no concept of these elements that I just created, nor has it code generated those. The cool thing about this, when we look at this, is that in my project I have my scene manager. I have which is what I called the project, scene manager, and I have these files that have been generated. What I want to do though is I want to be able to say, you know what, I want uFrame to create my main menu scene for me. I don't have any scenes defined, so if I just right click and say create scene, I don't want it to save it, and I don't know why, because it actually creates it and saves it, but that's what they do. I hit no. You'll see that now there is a folder called scenes with a scene called main menu scene. And actually I'm going to fix that. It should actually be main menu scene, not scene manager. Doesn't really matter, but you'll see what I mean in a second. Okay, so now that I've created that, the next thing I want to do is, well, I've got the main menu scene, but what we want to be able to do is dynamically load other scenes in our application. For that, I'm going to go up here and I'm just going to say File, New Scene, and let me close this guy out so you can see it. And here actually, first let me come back here. When I, through the designer, when I said create that scene, what it did behind the scenes, besides creating this folder, is all I had originally was just an empty main camera. It actually added a game manager and a scene manager, and it also did some association. It created a script called main menu scene manager, as well as a main menu scene manager script for both of these. The other thing that it has here is that, where is the, I'm sorry. A scene manager is what the game manager starts. So in any scene that you have, you're going to have a single game manager and then up to n number of scene managers. For this one, we only have one because we'll be loading the scenes otherwise. Now, if I go back here and I say new scene, you see that my camera went away or everything else went away? It's because I don't have anything else yet as part of my structure. So I'm going to go over here and call this underscore game manager. And I create another one called scene manager, I think is, if I can follow my notes. And I'm showing you two different ways to actually set up your scenes from a uFrame perspective, and they're important. The first one is one I would typically do if you didn't need to deal with dynamic levels or scenes. This one is important if you want to be able to do it once and then duplicate and let everything else happen for you. All right, so let's make sure I'm on the right spot. Okay.
So you just did that manually versus
Letting uFrame do it for us, and there's a reason why I'm doing it. Well, there's no reason. I could have done it. I could have done it the same way for both. I just want to show you guys that you can do it that way. So you're just confusing me now. So now on my game manager, I'm going to go ahead and add the game manager script. You're going to see here that start has nothing here. It says error scene manager not set yet. So on my scene manager, I'm going to add a component, and I think it's called level scene manager. Then I'm going to go back to game manager, and now that I've got the scene manager set up, I'm going to drag this guy, put him right there. Okay, I'm going to move this because I'm used to this being over here and this being down here. Okay. All right, now that I've got those two set up, let's see if there's anything else I need. Okay, now I just save, and I'm going to call this scene. I'm going to go under here, into scenes, level 1. You'll now see main menu scene, level 1. And what I'm going to do is select that scene, Control D twice. So now I have 3 scenes, 3 levels, I guess, if you will, that I can deal with. And let me save this. All right, so now what we want to do is we want to be able to create an element that represents the root view of the main menu and a view model, as well as the root view of each of our levels. And the way you do that is you come here, and in your main menu system, you double click it to go inside of here, and this guy can move around anywhere you want. And you right click and say add element. And I'm going to call this guy main, if I can spell, menu root. I know this is a paradigm shift, so we'll get there. Command. I'm going to add a command, and what I'm trying to do is setting up a contract saying from my main menu, I want to be able to execute a command that will load a level, right? So a button click or whatever that's going to implement that. And I think I just call this two.
Use an I command.
No, this is different. Yeah. And then over here, I'm going to select for 2 level what type it's going to be, string. So now this should show up as, wait for it, there, string. While I'm here, this is a step I always forget. Now that I have this guy, I'm just going to jump inside of him and say add view and let it do that. So now I have a view model, my view, and this will be associated with that main menu scene in and of itself. And don't forget, if you get stuck somewhere and you're like, well, how did I get here? Just remember to double click the top level because it's fully hierarchical, and sometimes the breadcrumbs don't really help you that much. Okay, I'm going to do the exact same thing of, oh, let me add an instance of that. Okay. to main menu system. I'm going to add the root so that the main menu system itself has an instance of this root so that I can have access to the command. All right, now let me jump back to the level system. Add element. And I'm basically, doing the same thing that I did with the other one, just so that I have access to the view model and the view.
You do F2 to rename?
I'm sorry?
F2 rename?
Yes, I believe so. I think that's actually right there. I'm just, yeah.
I thought you were a keyboard guy.
I am, but I don't know the system very well, so yeah, charge.
We're on day 9.
Day 9.
So you have 50% more experience, right?
That's about right.
F2's built in though, come on man.
I know, sorry.
I know.
This command is going to just say to, man, what am I doing?
Oh, that's unlegible. The color, the people who picked colors here must have been...
What happened there?
Programmers or something? These are horrible choices.
Programmers.
Something. Oh, God, not like...
There is the ability to override the colors. I just haven't played with it yet. Does that say to main menu?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, now it's like...
This one here is this would actually be what argument I'm passing it in as. So to main menu, because we know that when we're in the level, we just want to go back to the main menu. There's only one main menu. The main menu scene manager had 2 level, but then we had to pass in a string on which level did I want to go to. Does that make sense? So this one I don't need to specify what to pass because I'm just going to make the assumption I'm always going back to the same main menu. Then go to level system, add an instance so that I have the level root. And where else am I? I think that's good. Let me save and compile, which is control all this. All right, and this takes a second.
So you're building the menu system?
I'm building the controller, the view, and the view model that go around that main scene. I'm not really building a menu system yet. And as soon as I get done with this and we can actually test it, I'll show you what's actually happening behind the scenes.
That sounds like a little bit of code frame.
Yeah, this is definitely a paradigm. Don't get me wrong. This is a you're gonna feel like you've never mind, but you're gonna feel like that you've been. I won't say it again. Yes. When you start working through it and start seeing the code that it generates in the model, or not the model, the view model, the controller, and the views in Visual Studio, and then start interacting, which is what we're going to do. We haven't really gotten the code yet. And seeing what this is doing for us as far as structure and separation of concerns, that's what I'm really excited about. Because before, I would just have one single behavior that would be attached to like my player, and then I would have to handle for if I got hit, if I ran into something, how many lives, how to update the HUD, everything. And this is actually saying, no, let's do separation of concerns and use inversion of control, dependency injection to inject what you need. So it's a lot cleaner architecture. And the thing that I like about this is that Unity doesn't have a preferred structure. This is how you have to build our Unity apps. It says, do what you want, build it how you want, use whatever language you want, and knock yourself out. Whereas this is saying, you know what, if you're going to do it the MVVM way, I'm going to actually force you to do it this way and give you the benefits of it. But at the same time, I'm going to give you a lot of helpers. And you'll see that as we go through the code. You're like, because before I'd have to cache a lot of my objects that I needed so that I could reference them or put them in a static class. And this mitigates a lot of the ceremony that I had to do from writing games from the ground up. But it is a mind shift. Don't get me wrong, and I'm still getting used to it. But I appreciate the value add that it gives you, and I think that's the biggest thing.
Is there any value in unit testing this? Can you?
Yes, in fact, that is one of the biggest things that you can do with this. Is that there's nothing stopping you from using the code that gets generated and writing tests all around everything there, because it's actually more separated. There's now dependency injection. You don't have these high-level dependencies within the classes that you have, so it makes it a lot easier for you to write unit tests to be able to be TDD within this. And I think Teal was actually talking about setting that, or somebody was talking about setting that up for uFrame as well from your main menu perspective, being able to say, yeah, we're code complete from, or X number of percentage at least. But yes, excellent question. All right, so now what I'm going to do here is from the main menu scene manager, I'm going to add what we call a transition. And the reason why I can get that is because it was exposed from my instance here, and I had a link association. Okay, I'll add that to level, and then I'll add the same thing here for to main menu. And give it a second for it to show up. Save and compile. Hey, this is only 2 pages. I'm already halfway done. Oh, by the way, this example was going to cover scene manager, subsystems, commands, global instances, coroutines, and scene manager settings, just so you guys know. All right, so now we're finally going to get to Visual Studio and see what we get here. So I'm going to go here, open Visual Studio. The thing that I don't like, or that I'm having issues, and I'd like to hear Marty and Teal's or anybody else that's played with Visual Studio via Unity and Unity, is that in Mono on my Mac, I double click anything, it'll open up the solution as well as navigate me to that. With this one, and let me back up. So let me go back into anything in here, say for like my view. If I hit Control and click, oh, it's working now. On my other machine, it wasn't. So this is awesome. Good, I'll shut up. That's what it should do. That's the behavior I'm expecting, is that anywhere from here, as long as I Control click, I should be able to have it automatically come in. On my desktop, it wasn't doing that, so I probably need to reinstall VS for Unity. I've had to do it twice now. Weird. But okay. So in the main menu scene manager, which this is the wrong one anyways, but that's okay. I'll just open it up here. See,
Multi-monitor thing.
yeah, I do. I'm going to override a property. Oh, the other thing I don't like about this is that I need to update his project or property so it's only 2 spaces instead of 4, wasting so much. Okay, so then get to main menu scene manager. I don't see it. Let me make sure I think I know what I'm missing. Come on. Oh, it's still compiling. I must have skipped a step. 1 second. Just go through this one more time. Menu root. Okay, that looks right. Go ahead and add this. No. Okay, I did add that. Huh. Link to level C manager. Not there. Okay. Oh, that's why I'm getting confused. Okay, so link to level C manager. How does it make sense to do that? Oh. Okay. Sorry. I can't read my own handwriting sometimes. So, what I was missing here is that I need to link this to here and this to here. The reason being is that when I call to main menu, I need to know which main menu scene manager to actually call. The same thing to level, I need to call a level scene manager. Even though it's dynamic, it's going to load whatever I pass in as a string, but those associations need to be set up, and my cursive was pretty bad. So let's try that. And that makes sense because I was trying to override the get to level method. Come on. Okay, now in Visual Studio. Yes, please. Yes, please. If I come down here. Oh, it did it.
Yeah, the generator automatically blows away your code.
No, it's not that. It's smart enough to know the differences, but what it did is it locked my Visual Studio up. I've had this happen several times. I don't know why. So if you guys figure it out, let me know. But I just have to end task.
So is the experience better on the Mac?
Yes, much better. But I'm not going to say that a lot.
I don't use my Mac.
Yeah, I like the Mac a lot better. So let's go to Designer, and I just want to load this guy. So let's just see if this will work now.
In other words, there was a plugin in Visual Studio that just pretty much pegged the CPU at 100% locked in there.
Yeah, something's happening.
Just try patching the debugger to debugger to see where it was breaking.
See now, oh, it did load. Okay, so I'll wait a second later just to make sure we're happy. Why is it upset? Okay, good. Good grief. Stupid header. Override. Get to level scenes. There it is. So what I want to return here, if I can remember, is if you think about it, all I'm trying to do is pass in the name of the string, what level I want to load. So because everything here is IEnumerable, so that we can support the iObserver or iObservable, I'm just going to do return new. So if you look here, that's the name of the arg that got passed in. And because I'm using IEnumerable, I'm just returning back a collection with just a single initialization.
Does yield return arg?
Well, it has to be enumerable. It has to be an array or a collection, because that's the return type.
Arg should work.
Well, I'm going to leave it like this, and we can break it later, or it won't break. But I trust you. Okay. So now, let me jump back to Unity, now that we've got that. So now it'll know that when I execute that command, it'll look for that string that we're looking for. In our designer, here in our hierarchy, I want to add an empty game object.
No, I'm just curious, I mean, unknowable. Talk about unknowable,
Main. What's going on here? Okay. Menu roots. And I'm going to just add a component to that guy. And it's going to be called main menu root view. So this this main menu root is actually going to represent the view of the scene. Okay. And the script has already been created from uFrame, so I can just assign it. But I want it. uFrame gives us all these initialization steps, so I want to go ahead and I think I want to register it if I remember properly. Yep, register it. And I think that's all. And then go to build settings. And here, out of the box, if you create a brand new project in Unity, nothing gets included in your build for when you want to run it. So what I want to do is I'm just going to grab here, down to main menu, and just drop it there. There's one other thing uFrame does. uFrame actually has a loading scene or a loading overlay. So whenever you load a scene, it'll actually overlay and give you loading. You can override that, which we'll do in a second. Put any progress to text or whatever.
Every time you add a scene, you have to be smart enough to go and add it to the build.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that a feature?
Yeah, it's just the way it is.
So that way if you're not done with the scene, doesn't compile, you can leave it half baked and just leave it?
Not done with the scene.
Because if it's not being compiled, it should be.
Well, if the scene doesn't compile and you have it already loaded, and part of it'll break the build and you won't be able to compile.
Not if it's not in the build.
Well, if it's not in the build, but you'll still have to compile. Because the scene is what actually you bring in, but your code, all your scripts. So if you have any script that fails, regardless of whether or not it's included in any of the scenes, it'll break the build. So you can't have bad code, and it's still build.
You shouldn't have it.
Yeah. But it won't let you build unless you can compile, and that compile is whatever's in the project, regardless of what's assigned.
If you're not finished with the scene, you don't have to include it.
So really, that window,
Yes.
so this is really the package window, it's not really the build window.
The window that I showed you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just
When you're
for the.
building for Azure,
This isn't building Visual Studio. This isn't building the assembly. This is building the game scenes. This is telling it when I run the game, I want this scene to be the first scene to come up, and then here's all the other scenes that programmatically can get loaded in memory in the game. This is what tells Unity what to package into the executable as far as assets. Because if you do not include, say for example, I only include main menu scene, but level 1 through 3 have a bunch of artwork. That artwork will not be brought in if I only have main menu scene 1, even though they're part of the project and they get part of the compilation. They're not part of the actual output. So does that make sense?
So you're not building a DLL?
Well, you're building an executable, but it depends on what platform you're targeting.
Like you would in XAML.
So, okay, so now we've added that. We've added build settings. All right, let's run it. And I'm on my main menu scene. And what we're going to look at right now is just the project settings. I'll go to the root. Nothing. There's really nothing right now in the visual, in the UI. What is it? Which manager do I need to be on? Main menu root.
You know it's doing anything.
Well, there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing showing up up here, but I know that I'm running here, and the game screen would automatically select. But I could change the background of the scene. So, like, for example, if I wanted to, since I'm on the main menu scene, I could go to the camera, and which I've actually done on mine is just set it to black, so I know that between the different levels, I can visually know that I've transitioned. Now if I go here, and which guy is it? By selecting main menu.
Just thinking of learning curve on this. This is a long learning curve.
This guy is in the wrong spot. Sorry.
We could do a John and Bob lunch.
Yeah, do it in 2 days.
This guy is calling what?
Well, I think getting in and starting to play around with it and actually do something, try to come up with something.
Okay, I'll create this one as maybe. There we go. Something. Split pea soup. Now when I run this in the main root, I now have a command that's exposed, and if I say I think level 1, I changed it to black, right? If I say level 1 and I execute this command, which is nice because uFrame is actually not only executing this, but it's actually building the inspector properties to give us a button to test without ever having to create the UI. So we can actually test all of our code in the property inspector without really worrying about the graphics guy to make the pretty buttons and stuff like that. So I'm doing that, and notice now it just switched over to the level 1. It did, and we're going to actually tap into that in a second. So, all right. So now let me jump over to the level 1 scene. Save it, and I'm going to do the exact same thing, but just call this a level root instead
So
of.
in this program, you can actually run without saving like you have to do in Visual Studio. You have to save in order to run. Running something that's in memory, it's not technically saved as this.
Yeah, this.
Do you understand the question? In Visual Studio, you can't leave a file half saved. Like if you have like.
Yeah, it automatically saves it.
Visual Studio is stupid enough to let you check in files without being saved, but it's not stupid enough to actually
Yeah.
run without saving it.
It didn't prompt you until you changed.
I can't tell you how many times I check in a file and it's not in the CS project file, because Visual Studio decided I don't want to save that file for check in.
There was a few times when I was working with Unity a few weeks ago that I do a bunch of stuff and didn't save for a while and Unity crashed and all that was gone.
That's not hard.
Always save your work.
I'm just not used to being able to run and not having stuff saved.
So in this one, because I'm in my level, when I want to click the button, I know that I'm always going back to the same scene. So instead of taking in that dynamic string that I did before, I'm just passing in the name of the scene that I want to go to. So main menu scene. And I believe that is it. Save it. And I'm going to jump back to main menu. So now I'm going to load level 1, and then from level 1 I'm going to click to go back to the main menu.
Is it case sensitive?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think it probably is since it's .NET. Then if I go to level root and I say go to main menu, no parameters because it knows. So let's try going to level 1. I don't think it's going to find it. Ooh, that's nice. Let's try this. I'm really curious now because, well, I don't think it'll find that, but let's.
Does it blow up? Does it get out or run
I was doing an invariant culture comparison.
Yeah,
What's your warning down in the bottom left?
that's just GUI. That's the GUI. I haven't set anything up for GUI yet.
It'll take any.
You said level 7, so yeah, it can't find it, which makes sense.
And in the debug environment, or in those, whatever this is.
Yeah, well, let's.
docs,
Yeah, because it's trying to. Well, what Unity does behind the scenes is called application load level, and you're passing in the way loading levels work or scenes work. If we go back to build settings, the trick behind it is he's using it by name, but what it does is actually you say application load level and you pass in the index representation for this. So he's going through the array, finding the name, matching, which I'm assuming is too lower or whatever, to make sure that it always finds it. If it can't find it, then it just goes nowhere. trying to load something, it just doesn't find it. We would,
Throw an exception.
well, we could add that so that if we couldn't find it, saying, hey, sorry, you wouldn't have that. But for this example, we're not doing that yet. So what I want to show you next, though, is now that we can go back and forth, is some sort of indicator saying, hey, I'm loading X level and I want to pause, or I want to have it stay there for a second so that I can get everything in memory. So let me go back to Visual Studio, and this one is settings. So for every scene manager, you also have settings for that scene when that scene first gets loaded. So things like height and width, background color, texture, sprites, you could actually have it purely dynamic so that when you call it, it could look at a manifest or something and say, okay, it's this scene, go ahead and reply a different skin. And the cool thing about that is you could have a single level scene manager, but that could have completely different look and feel across all your devices so that it would look more like an iOS or more like Android, or from a sports perspective, kind of what you're talking about, when you load that scene, it can say, oh, okay, well, this user's profile likes football. Well, let me load the football textures, or let me baseball, or table tennis, or whatever their sport is that they like. All I'm going to do here, public. Oh, see, it did it again. What the hell?
Attach the butter to it.
No, I'm not going to waste my time on this stupid editor. I hate Visual Studio.
Because before we had a better experience.
Are you using Visual Studio or are you using?
I use Mac. I don't use Visual Studio. For
Mac has
Unity.
a visual-
I do use. I'm doing WPF stuff, and I have to use Visual Studio. But if I can get away with it, I'll use something else for whatever I'm doing. Web stuff.
If you're on Mac
Mm-hmm.
and you're using.
If I'm doing Unity development, I don't use Visual Studio at all. I use Umano or Sublime, which is what I've been using more now.
It's the best $70 we'll ever spend.
It is. Okay, so what I'm getting ready to do now is I'm just adding a couple properties so that we can set them, and so that you can actually see them in the inspector. Then I'm going to be able to dynamically set height and width. It could be anything that you wanted to do in the future, but I wanted to show you how easy it is that from the main menu you could set those properties depending on which type of level you're loading. So I'm going to go back here, wait a second for it to load, and then I'm just going to add two properties, height and weight. Yeah, I probably do.
The keyboards work, so that's probably some problem too.
The keyboard's awesome. That's the only thing from Microsoft that I like. Never mind. I didn't say that loud. I didn't.
And it doesn't care if it's a field or a property, it can evaluate them either way? Or you just say fields?
In Unity, this is outside of uFrame, I've never seen properties. I've always seen fields.
Really?
Yeah. The way that, and that's a good question. I've never tried that. If we can try that.
Some of the stuff that Teal's generated has been wrappers, but then again, it's doing the I notify property change kind of stuff.
Well, that sounds uFrame though. uFrame does all that for us.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to just save this. Let's see what it does. It may. I mean, I wouldn't see why it shouldn't. But
Well, if they're doing reflection, then it's going to be, field info is not the same as method info.
where would this be off of scene main menu root scene settings?
If a property is really just two methods
Oh,
with the same name.
scene manager. Did I do this in the level? I did in the level. Let me. It didn't show up. Did I save it?
Totally kick-ass, you did.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
So again, it doesn't pick up method info because it doesn't understand the whole get set, it only understands
Yeah.
field info.
So, and that's Unity. I've always developed this way. You can make something public so that you can access it from another class, but then you have to do an attribute over it so that it doesn't show up in the editor if you don't want somebody to be able to set it, things like that. Okay, so I've added those, and we just verified that it was there. And what we're going to do now is override the scene manager again. And there's a ton of overrides that that we get out of the box. But transition complete, and it's going to do this. Scene manager. I don't know, something simple. All right, so now I almost hit run. Okay. Scene manager. 400, 600 came in. So you can see that even though it was loaded dynamically, you can still set those on level, loading the transition completed. The last thing I'm going to do is just show a simple transition of progress and custom text. So, okay. And on the loaded, and what I'm gonna do now is just tell it to do this and wait for 3 seconds.
When you type in 0.4 out.
I'll show you the property. The progress, I just put 4, but it could be 0. This is this thing will get called multiple times, so that if you're loading something and it's taking a long time, you can show a progress bar. You can show some sort of indication of how far am I in the loading process in and of itself.
So 0.4 seconds.
0.4 f. It's just a float, so I'm just telling it I'm 40%.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep, and I'm going to wait 3 seconds before it finishes loading. So now I should see the text loading level. I think is what I said when I go here and test this again from the scene manager. Come on, why is this thing hanging? That's weird, isn't it? Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I hit it without passing something in. Okay. So now when I execute this, it'll hang for 3 seconds and then load it.
Where's the percentage bar?
Well, I didn't add that. See, that would be something that we would add in the scene for that level, and then have the view update it, because it could be anything that we could think of as far as, you know, something filling up, something going across, you know, a spinner doesn't, you know.
So you bubble in advance.